So folks, welcome back to my channel. I was extremely lucky the other day and managed to find a Hilleberg Soulo Tent in stock at Taunton Leisure, and I've been after one of these tents for quite a long time, and so I cracked and bought it while it was there, and it duly arrived within a couple of days, which was great. So today I'm basically having my first attempt getting it out the bag and pitching it and having a look round, and I thought I'd bring you along. My name's John and I make videos on camping, walking and astronomy. If you like what you see in this video, then please check my channel out, as you may find others that interest you there. But in the meantime, let's crack on with this video. I guess one question might be, why does somebody like me, who does most of the camping on the South Downs in the southeast of England, want a Hilleberg tent? And the answer to that really is a couple of experiences with the winter camping that I did last year. I had one night where the winds were something like 40 something miles an hour in a MSR Elixir 1, which is a 3-person tent, and the tent survived it, but I reckon it was right on its limit. And then I had another night where the winds were like closer to 60 miles an hour. It was one of the kind of big 3 storms that came through last year. And I was in a Van Gogh Torridon tent there, which is a kind of 4-season tent, but basically a valley 4-season tent. And it was right on its limit. And so I figured that if I wanted to do winter camping, I really needed a tent that was up for the job. And it's a bit surprising on the South Downs really that it gets the level of winds that you would like at 200 metres or 250 metres perhaps, that you'd more expect to get on top of a mountain. But it's extremely exposed on the South Downs. There's really nowhere to hide, and the wind, I think, blows straight off the sea, so this creates quite challenging conditions. So hence me thinking I could really do with a tent that's better up to the job. Hilleberg is a Swedish manufacturer, been going about 50 years, and is extremely well known amongst the wild camping fraternity, and they are either the best or certainly one of the best tent makers in the world. Their tents are premium, both in terms of quality and certainly cost, so you do have to think quite hard before you decide you want one, and perhaps have a few kind of slightly dodgy experiences like I did. The Hilleberg Soulo is a 1-person tent. I think it might have originally been developed for people like canoeists and motorcycle tourists, but it's perfectly capable of withstanding UK mountain winter conditions. It's part of their Red Label series, which is the mid-level of the 3 tiers that they do. The Black Label tents are intended for extremely harsh environments, perhaps like the Himalayas and stuff like that. I think there's a Yellow Label, I think that's the one below Red, and that's more of a kind of UK 3-season tent. But this Red Label tent is perfectly capable of withstanding winds of 60 odd miles an hour in mountains and snow cover. And this is one of the most popular tents amongst UK wild campers. Been like hen's teeth for the last 2 years to get hold of, so I'm really pleased to get mine. I think if you can't find one in stock, you can go to Nordic Outdoor, I think it is, and they'll actually kind of order one in specially for you. It might take a little while to get there, but at least you're going to get it in the end. But anyway, let's see how easy it is to pitch this tent, not having seen it before. All I've done is watched a Hilleberg video on how to do it, so it will be a good test of how simple it is to put this tent up. So the tent comes in this quite large stuff sack, In fact, there's loads of space in here. I was a bit shocked when it first turned up and I got it out the box, because I thought, heck, that's going to take up a lot of pack room. But there's a lot of space in here, and I think what people do is, this stuff sack's really good because it's easy to get the tent into the stuff sack. But what people would then do is try and compress it down as much as possible and have the poles and pegs basically separately in their pack. So yeah, let's get the stuff out and see what's in here. So this looks like pegs and poles. Yes, it is. There's a separate bag for pegs. We'll have a look at those in a minute. That's the tent itself and some instructions. Quite good instructions as well. So we'll have a quick look at those, because this is the first time I've actually put this up. So this is going to be as much of a surprise for me as it is for you. But let's look in a bit more detail what we've got. The little instruction book's really good. Looks very detailed. By far the best set of instructions I've ever seen on a tent. So inside the pole bag there are two poles that basically look identical to me, and then there's a third pole that's I think a bit shorter, and it's marked up with some red markers, and buried in the pole bag itself is like an internal sleeve, and it looks like they give you a sort of emergency pole section there as well. The peg bag has got 12 pegs in it, and they're sort of V-shaped pegs rather than normal little round ones. The tent itself is supposed to come with the inner and the outer clipped together, and I hope that is the case. And that's really it. So I'm going to look at the instructions now and see what I'm supposed to do, and start off, I guess, by laying the tent out. So I've just laid the tent out and put one peg in. It's not windy today, so it's not going to blow anywhere. In general, if it's windy, you'd peg it out, maybe in each four corners, but it's always worth putting one peg in anyway. I think I've had one or two close calls where I would have been chasing a tent had I not done that. The next step's just to click the poles together. Although these are extremely strong poles, I think they're DAC poles, Hilleberg do make a point of saying, you know, they're very strong, but they're also very light. So you don't want to be chucking them around, and you connect them together with care, essentially, making sure that each joint is fully made. So that's what I'm going to do now. There we go. So that's the three poles all connected up, and now the idea is that we put the poles into the relevant slots on the tent. There seems to be a couple of different ways you can do it. You can either put the short pole in first, which is the pole that runs across the width of the tent, or you can put the two long poles in first and then put the short pole in. The Hilleberg instructions seem to suggest putting the two long poles in first, and I did look. The only prep work I've done for putting this tent up is to look at the Hilleberg video as to how to do it, and they do suggest doing the long poles first, but I think they might have changed their tune a bit, because I'm pretty sure they used to say on an older video that I saw putting the short pole up. I suspect it doesn't really make any difference at the end of the day. So the good news with this tent, for me at least, I hate sleeves on tents. I can just never make the poles slide through nice and easily. Is here you have got sleeved sections, but only maybe 20-30 centimeters worth on each of the points that the pole slides into, and then after that the poles are held on by clips. So the idea is that you put the poles into the sleeves and cross them over to the corresponding sleeve on the other side of the tent. But I will guess before you do any of that, you probably have to get these guy lines out the way. Otherwise they'll all end up getting tangled up with the poles. So I'm going to sort the guy lines out first. So having got the guy lines more or less sorted out, I'm going to put one of the long poles across the tent. And repeat that with the other pole. So we've now got a structure that looks like this, but at this point now I can look at putting the pole across the width of the tent, and you can see here the sleeves that the poles fit into. You need to make sure, I think, that the pole goes right to the bottom of the sleeve, and each sleeve has this thick rubbery reinforced section on it. So that's on each of the pole locating points. As I say, you need to make sure that the pole is like well and truly in the bottom of that sleeve. But anyhow, let's put the crossing pole over now. So having done that, the tent now looks like this, and now all we do is clip on the remainder of the tent to the poles. In theory, you're supposed to work your way around kind of in a nice clockwise or anti-clockwise order, because it produces the minimum stress on the material of the tent. So that's what we're going to do. And that clip went on really easily, just with one hand. I was holding the phone with the other. So it's not a difficult job at all. So now we'll just work our way around the tent and clip all the clips on. Some of the latter clips are quite hard to get on. So what I think you're supposed to do is, rather than strain the material too much, is push the pole down so that it's easier to get the clip on. The other thing you've got to be a little bit aware of is not to tread on the material of the tent. So what you want to be doing is getting your feet underneath the tent if you need to get closer to the centre of the tent. But anyhow, that's the tent 99.9% up. So here you might want to guy out the guy lines, so I'm going to do that now. It's worth noting that the tent is freestanding, so it can be arranged in any orientation that you want to suit the prevailing wind conditions at the time. So one thing I haven't shown you is how you're supposed to connect this guy line here, the one that ties onto the pole, how you're supposed to connect it to the pole. And the idea is that you wrap it around the pole and pull it through. And what this does is it distributes the load into the pole much better. So you do that to all of the guys that have this fabric loop type attachment. And the idea with the two guy lines is that you use one peg for each guy line. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can use separate pegs if you want a bit more security. And the last thing we've got to do is to put this top hat thing over the tent. So the top hat covers this ventilation port so that you can get an airflow through the tent when it's raining and still be protected. The top hat's permanently connected on the back side of the tent, and you simply clip it in to the front side. So once you've got it clipped in, there's these tension pulls there just to tension it up, and basically that's it. It's probably the easiest tent I've ever pitched, albeit the conditions are pretty well perfect here today. But I really like the clip-on for the poles. That's my favourite method of making up tents. I haven't made a fantastic job out of this. I'm just at my local playing fields, and this is basically the first time I've seen this tent, so I'm sure I could have done a lot better job. I've not paid too much attention to the guy lines being tight or the pegs being in at the right angle and stuff. But even with this like first sort of botched job attempt at it, the tent doesn't look too bad at all. It's reasonably taut, as you can see, and I'm sure I could do a much better job of it, and I'll be practicing it a couple of times before I go out with it. The tent's basically a dome tent, as you can see. There are 3 crossover points, one here, and one there, so it's not a geodesic dome. It's probably like semi-geodesic or something. But the overall structure with all the guy lines is extremely strong. The tent's actually asymmetrical. This is the foot end here, which is a bit narrower than the head end, and the way you work out which end is which is the door entrance here is the head end. So that's the head end there, which is a little bit wider. And the idea is that you pitch it with the wind blowing at this foot end, and then that's the strongest way of doing it. Yeah, we'll have a little look inside now, see what it looks like. So this is the door, and as with all tents, it's worth taking a bit of care when you're doing the zips. Don't rush it. The zip's actually protected by this quite thick rubbery flap to keep the wet out from getting through the zip. And as you would expect, you can roll the door out the way. The inner's got this sort of T-zip arrangement, so you've got a central zip here, and then one here and one there. And of course you can roll this out the way. The porch area of this tent isn't as large by any stretch of the imagination as the one in my MSR Elixir 1, but that is an enormous porch. I think the idea is that down this end here you stick your rucksack and your boots. It looks like it will take my 65 litre rucksack okay, and up this end you can do your cooking, albeit much better with the doors open. Ordinarily you'd use a ground sheet with this tent. I just haven't bought that yet. That obviously helps protect the bathtub of the tent, keeps things a bit cleaner inside, and it also reduces the amount of condensation that you're going to get. The fly sheet comes pretty well right down to the ground, and that's making it absolutely roasting inside this tent today. It's about 20 degrees at the moment. I suspect this tent will increase the inside temperature by maybe 5 degrees, something like that. Internally, the tent's actually quite big, if you excuse my bright blue socks. So that's the foot end there. So with a normal or even a large mattress, you've still got some space here to stash your clothes and your stuff. I think it's might be 105 centimetres wide at its widest point. I'll check that and put it up. It's 220 centimetres long, so it certainly will cover people of 6 foot or so. In terms of head height, there's loads of headroom. I'm 5'8", and there's loads available on top of me, but you would have to take into account that you're going to have your sleeping mat down and your sleeping bag down, which will eat away at your headroom. But again, I would imagine that if you're around 6 foot tall, it should still be okay. There's a bunch of loops and things inside the tent that would enable you to hang lanterns or run drying lines and things like that. One half of the T on the inner has insect mesh, which would be good to cool the tent down apart from keeping the mozzies out, and it also would aid ventilation. The other side doesn't, that's just a straight material side. There's no permanent mesh inside the tent, it's all zip uppable, and that's what you would expect really for a tent that's intended for winter use. I think the bathtub is 70 denier material on the base, and has, I think, 15,000 millimeters hydrostatic head, which is an enormous hydrostatic head. So this should mean that kneeling on it and stuff like that shouldn't bring any water through. As I said earlier, I'm still going to use a footprint to protect it. So earlier on we saw the ventilation panel, and it's possible to open that up from the inside of the tent, and you're still protected from rain from the outside by that top hat there. Obviously you can lower the whole thing further if you want more fresh air in the tent. The ventilation panel has a little loop and toggle, so I'm not going to try and do it one-handed, but it's possible to just roll it away just like that. And in fact I can feel the difference immediately inside the tent from this being opened up a little bit. The material of the fly sheet is, I think, 30 denier. It's Hilleberg's own material. I think they call it Curlon 1200, which relates to its tear strength. Basically it's a ripstop silicon or triple silicon coated fabric. Hydrostatic head is something like 5,000 millimeters, which is easily good enough for a tent in storm conditions, and I just think it looks fantastic. Obviously I've seen a lot of YouTubers using them in all sorts of different conditions, but yeah, it's a great looking tent. So I think for a first time pitch on this tent, I'm extremely satisfied. To have a proper instruction manual is amazing. Normally you just get a little bit of instruction sewn into the sack of the tent. Just the feel of the tent sounds a bit weird, but it is true. Just the feel of the tent, it feels quality. The poles are obviously very high quality, as are the pegs. The material itself, whilst I'd hesitate to stroke a tent, about the nearest you can get is with this. The ease of putting it up, considering I'd sort of only ever watched one video on the Hilleberg site, and this was the first time I'd got it out the bag. Everything was there, everything was right. It was very simple to put up. I think I love clips anyway on tents. Any tent that's got clips on it, it's a good tent for me. The fact that it's inner and outer connected means that you can put it up in pretty poor conditions, and your inner will stay dry. The clip method, if you go round kind of clockwise or anti-clockwise, means that in high wind it should still be possible to put it up and you won't be fighting the tent as I have done in the past. Internally, I think for me, I'm actually used to bigger tents. The MSR Elixir 1 is got a huge porch, very livable, one-person tent, and my other favourite tent is a Van Gogh Torridon 200, which is like a spaceship in terms of the amount of room you've got in it. So I'm going to have to kind of improve my campcraft a little bit, I think, make sure I don't take too much stuff. But I'm really looking forward to using it. Technically it's a winter tent, but I think I'll be tempted to try it out next time I do a tent camp and see how I get on. People have often spoken about condensation in Hilleberg tents. I think it's a problem on winter tents in general, condensation, simply because the fly sheet comes right down to the ground, and so you don't get the airflow through it that you might do in a, say, a 3-season tent like my Elixir One. So I'll be interested to see how that pans out. In most circumstances I'll be looking to maximise ventilation and only like close everything up if I absolutely have to. But I think this isn't really a problem specific to Hilleberg. It's a general problem for 4-season tent users. So yeah, I'm quite excited to get out and use it. I'll obviously do a follow on how I'll get on when I do that. My next camp is likely to be a bivvy bag camp on the South Downs, because I haven't done a bivvy bag thing for ages. And then after that I'll go out in this tent, either back on the Downs, or if I can get there I wouldn't mind going to the Brecon Beacons and camping on top of Fanny Big or Cribbin or something like that, just to get it at maybe 700 meters and see how I get on. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope some of you have found it useful. Thanks very much for watching if you've got this far, and I'll see you next time. Take care.